Hellblade 2 is one of the angriest video games I've ever seen. All the pivotal emotional plot points are about rage and frustration with the world, and characters bellow guttural screams in combat with brutally realistic violence. Where Sacrifice was about coming to terms with the loss and being accepting of your circumstances, Saga throws all that out the window and says that this world is kill or be killed. It's a bleak yet emotional experience where anger is the motivation of every character, from the heroes to the villains. Senua herself has set off on a quest to murder the leader of the clan who is enslaving her people. At the beginning of the game, it's that understilled fury that keeps her from collapsing from exhaustion and pushing through her pain. When she is confronted with her first choice to spare someone, the game explicitly reveals that she isn't choosing to help this slaver out of the goodness of her heart, but because she needs him to guide her. She's more than willing to abandon him once she's done with him. Her main foes, the giants, are also driven by madness. Iltalga is driven by grief for the loss of her child, and her explosive boss battle couldn't be any more rageful. With her chaotic lava attacks and unrelenting screech, she's only defeated by quelling her anger by returning her child to her. While Sharavesi is motivated by hate for being cast out of his village and torments it out of a need for revenge. Once again, he's only stopped when Senua absolves him of his sins and his rage subsides. His boss battle takes place in an unstable and violent tempest, again reflecting the giant's mental state as volatile and driven by emotion. I think this is Hellblade trying to say that you need other people to help you deal with your anger, that pushing people away isn't going to solve your problems, and that dealing with rage on your own isn't going to help. Your mind is just going to whisper more and more negative things to you until you're trapped in a spiral of rage and malice. This brings us to Senua and her psychosis. In the first game, I thought of her condition as some kind of illusion. I thought it was left ambiguous whether what she was seeing was actually happening, and that her voices were playing tricks on her, but they still helped her break through her mental prison and free herself from the constraints of her mind. In Saga, her voices are openly antagonistic, pushing her to give in to her base instincts and let the hate flow through her. Whenever she shows mercy to a foe, the voices lash insults at her, calling her stupid and weak. The voices are her enemy rather than her helper in this game. So how does Senua break free from the dark thoughts echoing around her head? What helps her overcome her own rage and makes her abandon her hatred and search for a better solution than the cycle of violence? Everyone does. In the final scene of the game, we are shown the memories of all the people who supported her on this roaring rampage of revenge, and how they stood by her, followed her, and believed in her. She's redeemed by the people who look up to her, showing that she's not the infallible Mary Sue hero of the story. She has to rely on other people just as much as they rely on her. You can see Senua's mental state deteriorate throughout the game, not only through the explicit voices in her head, but also through this animalistic combat. It's not terribly deep and doesn't evolve over the journey, but I think it's meant to show her fury. Her attacks seem ineffective against foes much bigger and stronger than her, knocking her to the ground and overwhelming Senua with pure strength. She's always backed into a corner, and like a caged animal, she fights back. Her attacks overexert her, with beast-like grunts erupting from her throat. It almost feels like every enemy has a unique kill animation made just for them. This isn't some power fantasy against fodder foes. This is a character barely hanging on, fighting just to stay on her feet through sheer force of will. When Senua finally gets that killing blow, she almost delights in its brutality, like there's some kind of sick thrill in overcoming this abominable monster. However, this combat system is born out of pure instinct, not skill. Okay, you're deep enough into the video, and I'm sure you've put two and two together by now. You're expecting me to say that Hellblade 2 is Xbox's The Last of Us 2, and no, I wouldn't say that, because while both games star a young woman on a conquest for vengeance, the themes and messages couldn't be more different. Ellie loses everything as a result of her rage. The Last of Us is about showing the consequences of going too far, and even if you stop at the last minute, that doesn't erase everything you did leading up to that point. Ellie never overcomes her anger, and she doesn't get redeemed, she just gives up because she can't stand to lose anymore. Hellblade is a more positive narrative about how to overcome anger with the help of the people around you. Despite Senua being driven by rage, she never does anything to hurt herself or the people around her. In fact, it's her willingness to try and talk out her problems that gets Thorgester killed. Senua never crosses that bridge into an awful person. In fact, the story sees her rehabilitating multiple people's rage, so there's a clear line between the messages of Hellblade and The Last of Us, despite how they deal with the same subject matter. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video comparing the effect of vengeance on the world in Dishonored and The Last of Us Part 2.